Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. I'm your host, Jerome Rand, and we are feeling the butterflies because we're about to take off on yet another adventure out to sea. A little offshore time, a little solo action. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also... I shot out of bed this morning because I was kind of like, holy cow, we got a lot of stuff to do. It's been rainy and cold and windy for pretty much the entire time I've been on this dock. And with the Gulf Stream guarding the Atlantic in strong northerlies, and I think we had like 10-foot seas out there the other day. Not exactly a good time to set sail. So I bit the bullet. We booked into this marina, this lovely place for almost a week now. It's crazy, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and it's been pretty productive for sure as far as creating stuff and then connecting up with lots of people. So it hasn't been all just a money hemorrhage by any means, but so we're about to get into it. But I definitely feeling a little bit excited, a little bit anxious about this little third round, the final round of this winter sailing before I head off and do some speaking. So we're essentially going to get into that. We're going to get into some of the prep work, but a lot of what I think I want to really get into is sort of focusing that anxiety and focusing sort of that worry into productivity and utilizing it instead of letting it sort of paralyze me. I don't know how long this podcast is going to be, but let's get into it and see what we can come up with. See what gems I might be able to uncover from my bumbling through this thing called life. But before we start, like I always say, if you want to help support this show, keep it going through the future, consider checking out the links in the description of the podcast or the episode itself for things like the Patreon family, that wonderful group of people that have kept supporting me over all the years. Also, one-time donations via Venmo and PayPal, as well as the merch, the books, the shirts, and the children's books. Links for all of those. And then, obviously, sailinginto.oblivion.com if you think that I might be a boost in attendance at your next event, whether it's a dinner or a school or a fundraiser or anything like that. I love telling some old sea stories and sharing my experiences with people. So you can reach me through that website, sailinginto.oblivion.com. Also, you can reach out to me for any coaching, whether it's online or in person, and we can kind of go from there. Done. All right. Whew. Plugs are over. Grab my crispy BL. Take a nice big swig, and off we go. Yes. Shot out of bed. Finally, we had decent weather. It was still really cold this morning. I know that's a relative term for most Americans right now because the vast majority of this country is blanketed under snow. Talked to my buddy Scott up there in Beaufort, South Carolina, and they got snow up there. So I think a few places down here in Florida did as well. We just got a lot of rain and overcast and dreary weather, but not today. Today we had the sun, and we had a little bit of warmth. So I was able to basically get down to my list, which has been staring at me and only growing, unfortunately, since I got here on the dock. I was just kind of waiting for a good weather day because most of the stuff I wanted to do was actually on the deck. Each time we do these little trips, I'm finding nuances and little things that I want to change or problems that are coming up. Case in point, we went to... I think we were just tacking over the staysail on our way back into Fort Pierce, and the staysail sheet got wrapped around one of these. They have like a technical term, but essentially it's like a belay pin or something like that you would tie off the halyard. Unfortunately, on this boat, they're decorative. I don't actually use them. They're on basically a big plank of wood that was affixed to the mast pulpits that stabilize me while I'm up there reefing. Well, I saw that happen once, and that was enough for me. I obviously don't want to be in that situation when things get pretty ugly and have to like run forward, or worse yet, like damage something, or damage just mass pulpits would be pretty bad. Those are stainless steel. They're pretty strong. I think they'll hold up. But in any event, I ended up removing those, and yeah, it kind of gave Sparrow a bit of a sleeker look up there. It's always funny when you pull something off or you add something to a boat that you've been on for so long, because it just doesn't feel right. It feels foreign. And once those were off, though, the polish came out, and I did all the stainless, all the stanchions, the pulpit, the boomkin struts. Everything is a little shinier, a little nicer. It had been way too long, and I was wanting to do that all week, but essentially you can't really polish stainless in the rain. It doesn't work all that well, let me assure you. But got all that finished up. And that was just to basically get the ball rolling and start my way. And that, again, I know that's something I've mentioned before, but when you're facing all this big old list, which mine was about a half a page of different little projects that needed to happen, from stuff in the engine room, change the oil, all that sort of stuff, to deck work, polishing, that, you start with something that you feel confident you can do, and do with a bit of enthusiasm, and that is a snowball effect just waiting to happen. It really does, I think, seem to help, at least me personally, kind of get the momentum in gear. And that's really one of the big things, especially when I get anxious about an upcoming trip, or let's shrink it down. Let's go even more micro than that. When I get anxious about leaving a dock, so I'm kind of like, ooh, we're tucked in here real tight. This is going to take some artwork to get me out of here without smashing into a whole bunch of other boats, getting side two, all the worst nightmares you can think of. And the more you think about it, the more your fear level and worry starts to rise. Again, this is just me personally. So what do I do rather than just sit there and stew about it and worry and keep me up all night? And believe it or not, sometimes it's like it wants to. I essentially like to try to focus that energy, that nervous energy that keeps you up, and use it to my advantage, and try my best to then come up and take a look at things. I'll use that energy that I've got to check what the wind is going to be. So, okay, well, possibly am I going to be dealing with wind-wise tomorrow? Let's get preemptive on this. Let's try and come up with some sort of game plan, too. Let's look at the current. What's the current going to do? Is it going to be pushing me out, pushing me in? Luckily, there's not too much current right here where I am. There's just going to be a touch of it. And then 3, let's look at the actual maneuver itself and figure out what time we want to go. Do we need a second person? You see where I'm going. I'm basically trying to use this extra energy that I have to, rather than just worry about what I'm about to do, I'm actually just going to come up with 1, 2, or maybe 3 different game plans depending on what happens. And then once I have that, once I just have the smallest outline, a couple of bullet points really, then all of a sudden I kind of feel better. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about it because I've already thought all of this through to a point where suddenly I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're going to be able to deal with a bunch of different situations. It's probably not going to be that bad because when I look at it, it's like, well, I got plenty of room in this fairway. I'm just going to back out. I'm going to pivot turn, and I'm going to be out of here. Then I look at the wind, and I'm like, oh, well, it's going to be blowing. So it's going to blow the bow right where this is actually not going to be too bad. And then all of a sudden, anxiety levels disappear. You get a good night's sleep. You wake up. You go through the drill. You've already thought it through, and suddenly this thing that could have been a worrisome thing. And again, yeah, it's just leaving a dock. But hey, if you're like me, you know that leaving the dock is where all the big money mistakes happen. I've seen it a million times before. I will never forget being at Riviera Beach Marina down there in West Palm. The current rips through. I had just bought Sparrow. She was there on the dock for about 2 months, getting the boat ready, put together, all that sort of stuff for our trip down to the Virgin Islands. And I watched chaos ensue over and over again. And a lot of it just point blank was because people were trying to dock in this maze of a dock when the current was ripping through. They're just making it super hard on themselves. So I will always keep that in my head because I had fenders placed on hanging off of Mongo, old Mongo 1.0, and just because boats had literally been pressed up against. It just happened so much. I can remember one day where 3 boats all had multiple incidents where there was a decent amount of damage done. And boy, I'll just never forget it. It's a great lesson to see. It's a great example of how not to do things. And, the lesson learned there was just, if you're going to check into a marina, always ask and talk to them about whether there's tidal current or anything like that. Then just find out when slack is. Adjust your schedule. Jeez Louise. Because sometimes marinas aren't, they're not on top of the game when it comes to that, or they just want to be amenable and let people come in whenever they want. Now, granted, I know some people are absolute experts. You might have the type of boat where it's no big deal. This thing will pivot around a fin keel like nobody's business. But Mighty Sparrow is not that. I will give it to this marina in particular. The Fort Pierce City Marina has been fantastic. The staff are wonderful, and they did ask whether or not I had a bowsprit. Unfortunately, the first time I came in here with James, we did probably one of the most beautiful pivot turns against the wind. We're talking revving up into the 2500s on this boat, which is exceptional and excessive, but it had to happen. And I think we got a bit of a rep after that. So they kind of stuck me in this really tight space this time. So I don't know. It can work both ways, good and bad. But again, I digress. Back to sort of the anxiety level. Now, we're looking at a big trip. We're looking at, hopefully, 2 weeks offshore. I just heard that I'm going to do another speaking event down here in Florida towards the second half of February. So it's going to cut things a little shorter than I wanted, but it still gives me a good week to go out, a couple of days to go down, and maybe 5 days to get back. Now, I don't know. The math on that might not work, except for the fact that I am leaving in a very light wind patch, and I'll probably be coming back on a bit of a blow. That's how it looks like it's going to sort of shape up. But we're essentially going to head offshore. We're going to cut right across that Gulf Stream and just get out into it. And whatever the ocean deals to us is what we're going to have to deal with. And third time's the charm. That's when usually all the bad stuff happens. So I'm kind of gearing up for that. And when I woke up this morning, I definitely had a bit of nervous energy knowing that I had that pile of things I needed to do. Again, it was sort of one of those things where rather than just shotgun straight into it, I like to always take that minute. I like to take that moment, make some coffee, look at my list, get into the day. Don't rush into anything because I like that game plan. And again, this is trying to, at least for me, combat that anxiety and that worry that like, oh man, I got so much to do. I don't know if I can do it. Oh, this isn't going to work. Like, all that sort of stuff. And, it's kind of funny if I think about it because I don't think I ever really used to get like this quite so much. And I don't know what it is. It seems to have been something that has cropped up ever since that trip where I got turned upside down. And it's just one of those things where your experiences have a tendency to change you for good or bad. But, hey, at least now I get to dissect this. And I think from what I hear from people writing into the show and stuff, they definitely appreciate the very sort of, what's the best word? The insight that I'm trying to give them, the very outright and forthright. That's the word, forthright. Because it's, it's just what I'm going through and what I'm trying to deal with and sort out. And, I know that I'm always going to, and I've said this before, but I know I'm always going to hear that sound of that wave. I'm going to feel the motion of the boat. I'm going to know what it feels like to have that storm build around me. But that does not mean that I'm going to let it hinder me going forward. It just means that I have to come up with a few tricks and a couple of tools in the old tool box that are a bit new, a bit shiny, and help me to basically keep going after what I'm going after, which I don't know. If you know what that is, please let me know. Right into the show. I'd love to hear about it. Because I'll tell you, when I'm standing out there in a freaking squall within the next couple of days, I'm going to be questioning just that question for sure, without any doubt. So, yeah. So building that momentum, kind of coming up with those game plans, that definitely is going to help a lot. When I looked at, and again, taking a moment, I'm not going to jump right into this big list of things that I had to do, but I wanted to take it sort of sequentially and come up with a bit of a game plan, because I had a small goal in mind, and that thinking is why taking those moments, taking that little bit of time when you are sort of staring down a big day is, I think, really crucial, because then you can come up with like a little micro goal just for the end of the day. Like, okay, what I wanted this morning when I woke up while I'm drinking my coffee, sitting at this lovely dinette, was to be able to sit down and do a casual podcast, drinking an ice cold BL, and explaining how I went and did it all and got through the multitude of tasks. And, I can flip to it real quick. But essentially that was sort of having just that goal in mind. All of a sudden, I don't know, it kind of presented a challenge to me in a way where I said, okay, well, can I do this? And whenever I question that, there's something inside of me, and I think there's something inherent in all people, that when presented with that question, we want to just shout out, oh, hell yeah, we can do it. Like, obviously, I can handle everything that gets thrown at me. At least you want to think that way, and I definitely do. I'm a victim of that in a very, very good way. Where is my list? I didn't, throw it away, did I? No, I definitely did not. Oh, man. I'm going to find it. Just hold fast. Oh, I hope these pages aren't making my microphone get all messed up. All right, where is it? That's the good, the bad. Tune rig. Nope, it's not that one. All right. Well, you know what? I don't want to waste too much time going through this thing trying to look for a list that probably won't all be all that impressive anyway. Well, in any event, essentially, we had to polish the stainless. We had to fix the topping lift, which meant taking apart the boom. We had to change the oil on the engine, check the battery water levels. We had to top up the water tank. We had to pressure wash the deck. We needed to sort out the sails. We needed to do a fan installation. We needed to charge everything. The list goes on and on and on. And yeah, when I'm looking at it, I was like, oh man, this is okay. We only got one day. I was hoping to have a week. But again, I challenged myself, and I think that helps sometimes to be like, all right, well, what do you got? What do you got? What kind of guy are you? What kind of gal are you? You got the gumption, you got the grit to be able to just punch on through all this sort of stuff. And if you seriously just, you can essentially just be thinking about it in your own head, and you're like, well, let's have a discussion. And I think one of the things that happens, at least in my head, is that I stop thinking of, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot of work. And I start being like, oh, well, do I actually think I can do this? What kind of person am I? I'm like tricking myself into it. And suddenly I'm like, well, all right, got my coffee. Let's throw down. Let's see what we can get. And that's where, boom, you just pick that first little thing off the list, and then suddenly you're crossing that off and that off and that off. And then, you're halfway through the day, you're looking at everything, and you're like, wow, that list is so tiny now. I've got a little bit of wiggle room. And so you can throw in some other things. Obviously, more stuff is going to come up, whatever. But the whole time. And here's one of the probably most obvious, but also I think one of the things that if you can kind of keep it in mind, it helps a little bit with the overall sort of, I don't want to keep just, oh, excuse me. I don't want to keep saying just anxiety, but the overall concern for, heading offshore for maybe 2 weeks, the concern for that disappears the minute you start jumping into this stuff because you're focusing on all these projects. The productivity always, I don't want to say it's a distraction, but it is. It essentially, it's a great tool for, if you're worried about something, fill your brain with other projects and other things, and it's twofold because one, it's distracting your brain, but two, it's also being productive towards that goal that you're about to jump into that's giving you that worry. And each time you are productively doing something that takes away from the uncertainty or the X factor, if you will, of like, oh, is this going to be a successful thing? Am I going to be able to rise to this challenge, go out to sea for 2 weeks? Am I going to be ready? Is the boat going to be ready? Well, if I start ticking all of these projects off, every single project adds and leans the scale and starts tipping things towards, yes, this is going to be successful. Because now I know the engine's good. Now I know the sails are good. Now I know the topping lift for the boom is good, all that sort of stuff. I still have to do one more systems check, but it's like the easiest one in the world, and that's just to go flip the nav lights on. And that's because it's nighttime now, and I can finally do the simplest, and it's actually one of the most enjoyable. And I'll probably do the full systems check, i.e., bilge pump's working, all the electronics are working, VHF, nav lights, all that sort of stuff. Because, hey, why not just go through the whole thing? Then I don't even have to think about it twice. And when the morning comes tomorrow, instead of waking up in a bit of a panic trying to do last minute things, I get to wake up, make some coffee, make some breakfast, look at the environment around me, enjoy my maybe even if it's warm enough, go for a run. I don't know. I'll have that to think about tomorrow morning rather than do I have time to complete this stupid list that I didn't get to because I just sat there and, kind of worried about what was going to happen or whether or not I could get it done. So I don't know. There's a lot of this stuff where it may sound like it's just me trying to lie to myself or convince myself of other things. And maybe it is. But hey, if it's working, well, then jump on that train and go for a ride because that's all that really matters, right? We're trying to dampen down the worry, the anxiety, the concern about heading off to sea for 2 weeks out into the Atlantic Ocean and then get back. And I think I did a pretty good job of that today. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. The boat's still a bit of a mess. I got a little cleanup to do. I got that last systems check. But once that is done, everything's tucked away. I'm going to probably make a little bit of dinner, something light. And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling ready. And I'm not feeling worried. There's a little bit of butterfly action, but I think that's just living, when you're about to do something, one, that you're super excited about, because I definitely am. I think the fact that I'm 2 trips down on this, I'm feeling pretty confident in Sparrow, obviously. All the systems seem to be working out very, very well. The boat's clean. The boat is clear. It's concise. Like, I uploaded a video on YouTube, or it's uploading right now. I don't know. It's going to take a while, but just a quick deck tour because I'm looking around at Sparrow and I'm like, man, how many times have I seen this boat just like this, ready for the ocean? Life raft tied down in the footwell in the cockpit. The deck is clear. The only instrument up there is the whisker pole / spinnaker pole. Everything else is buckled in, sealed up. We're not leaking. Well, we're going to see if we're not leaking. I got to see if that scupper repair that I did worked or not. But, we'll deal with that when we get out there. And yeah, I don't know. The excitement level, I know this is the last of the sailing trips for the winter. I'll probably be able to do another one this spring, hopefully headed back up a bit north, but that's not going to be until April or something like that. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm feeling good. I went from kind of waking up thinking, holy cow, we got a lot to do, a little overwhelmed, a little anxious, to feeling pretty darn confident. And yeah, those were sort of the keys, taking a moment, thinking things through, getting that momentum by just jumping into the list to get the ball rolling. Start with the easy stuff just to get that snowball building up. Coming up with game plans, really just, filling my head with those projects, focusing on that, and knowing that with each one of those, I just kept sort of punching down on that anxiety to make it so that I am feeling more confident in the boat than I felt the last time I went out, and definitely way more than the first time I went out. And, if I think about it, going all the way back to being in Belhaven and launching this boat, I was staggeringly nervous. And I was headed out into perfectly protected waters of the Pungo River and the Pamlico Sound and the Neuse River, and then all that stuff. I mean, I was worried about the engine, rightfully so, because we were overheating and all that sort of stuff. But again, I think the last thing that really does help, and this one is a leap. It's a leap of faith. It sort of takes a little bit of time and takes some practice for sure. But it's knowing that when those worries crop up of like something unexpected happening, something out of the blue that you thought was all good, but now it is broken and now you got to deal with it. I like to take a moment when those worries start bubbling up inside and you start questioning this, that, and the other thing, besides coming up with game plans to be able to deal with this or deal with that. I think fundamentally in the end, it just comes down to knowing that you're going to rise to the occasion. You're going to be able to overcome whatever it is that the world is throwing at you. And if you're kind of like, well, I don't know if I will, well, then sometimes it's worth it to peel back the hands of time in your brain and just think about those times where, the stuff really hit the fan. You came up with a game plan. You figured out and outsourced a solution on the fly, and you were able to overcome those adversities. And you start chalking those up, because I'm pretty sure if you really focused on it, you'd be surprised how many times that's actually happened in each and every one of your lives. And man, all of a sudden you get this roster and you're starting to be like, dude, I'm MacGyver. I can handle anything. Yeah, I don't want, let's not get crazy, obviously, but again, another tool, another method to kind of dampen down that worry and that anxiety, because it is, again, in the end, we just want to be enjoying our time. We want to do the things we want to do, but we don't want to be riddled with worry and concern the whole time we're doing them. It's not fun. I hate it. It happens to me plenty of times, and it's one of those things where I will do anything and everything I can to combat that and make sure that I can at least tip the scales in my favor as far as having fun, being relaxed, enjoying my time, rather than freaking out and deciding that, it's not worth it at all in the end. So, that's my 2 cents. So like I said, I didn't know how long this podcast was going to be. I'm going to do my systems check, and then I'm going to get a lovely night's sleep, hopefully, and wake up refreshed and ready to go back out on that ocean. Really looking forward to it. Good forecast. I got a couple of podcasts coming out, one at the end of the month and then one a week after that. But again, I'm going to be coming back with a whole heap of content, I hope. And yeah, just want to say thanks for listening to these ramblings, especially. This is kind of diving into sort of these methods in the brain and the anxiety and all that sort of stuff. But again, I hear enough from people through the website and through emails that it's appreciated. And if it's appreciated, well, then I'm happy to share it with you. And yeah, I got there's no ego here saying I'm not, I don't suffer from this sort of stuff. I don't get down. I don't, I'm not some stoic statue sitting up there in the cockpit of Sparrow, steely-eyed, staring down a gale sort of thing. There are worries, there are concerns, and I try as much as I can to mitigate those, to enjoy my time. And if something I say, one stupid little thing that I come up with in my brain that helps me, helps you, well, then it's all worth it. So happy sailing, everybody. Enjoy the cold. I'm going back out to sea. Till next time, thanks for listening.